taking its time.
As it loves to do.
Got some freaking good questions, man. I put together my dream questions. Oh, here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me just make sure that I'm muted. Yes, I am muted over here. I believe that everyone is now listening to us on YouTube. I'm going to quickly plug in my link into my other channel so that all of the people are able to join us here. Give me 1 second. Yeah. And that worked. We're live. Okay, everyone out there, thank you for joining us for our next episode of Chronicles episode 7, Bubblemania. We are here with someone who, look, I'll tell you right now, quick intro, because for me, when I first moved to Canada, you don't know this, Marcus, but Remo was a huge influence in my life. Then Johnny B, I met him through Remo. Then that led me gradually to people like yourself and Ryan Lee. Bubbleman, I have to tell you, man, Marcus, I have to tell you, brother, that it's such an honor to have you here, and that even though we just met like a year or two ago, for me, you've been a household name since I was like 16 years old. You've been, for all of my Latino brothers, in fact, in Mexico, we have a really, really soft spot in our heart for you, brother. Thank you so much for joining us today, Marcus.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the kind words. It's been great to link up with you, and I love everything that you and Julie have been doing at CannaReps, and just always happy to be a part of it.
A big hello to Julie out there. She's at home with her new baby, and a big hello to Sharon as well, our admin. We couldn't do nothing without them. Marcus, I've got a little bit of an unstable feed from you. I think oh, there you are. You're back, and I'm gonna put us in gallery mode so that we're equal on the screen. None of this big me, little you thing, okay? Now,
okay.
My man, I've put together my list of dream questions for you today that I'm gonna have a great pleasure sharing with my public. To all of you out there that are joining us, this is the new YouTube feed for Chronicles. We're gonna be on here from now on. No more Demio. We're on YouTube from now on. And to start off, Marcus, real quick, I know that last time we did a pretty deep incursion into trichomes and trichome science, and as well as just geeky trichome facts that you shared with us that intersect with your craft, which is hash making. I really want to give people that maybe didn't get the chance to join us last time, give us a very brief definition of what bubble hash is and that finer form, full melt. Yeah. Oh, you're on mute. Yeah.
I like to mute myself before I talk. Luckily, this app told me I was on mute as I started to speak. Literally across my screen, it said, "You're on mute." So yeah, that's easy enough. You know, really, the activity of the active components of cannabis, the terpenes and the cannabinoids, are all produced inside the glandular trichome head. So there's 6 different types of trichomes, but only 3 of them are actually glandular. And so what I do is I try to teach people how to isolate just those trichome heads into a 99.9% ratio of purity. And then with that, what you get is bubble hash. Now, depending on how well it was grown, depending on how well the plant expressed itself, and depending on how much oil content is actually in those glands. And I always use the same sort of analogy, which is we want, well, like water balloons, you know, those little balloons as a kid you'd fill up with water and they'd just be so big and the membrane was so thin, you know, it was like it made up a very small amount of that ball. We want the same thing with our trichomes. What we don't want is like those Tootsie Pops, which were like the hard candy coating with a tiny little bit of the gummy goodness on the inside. Some people grow trichomes like that. In fact, more people grow trichomes like that than actually the other way. And when you do it the other way, where you express those genetics so beautifully, you end up with a product that myself and Skunkman Sam about 20 years ago coined full melt.
Yeah. And of course, for those of you who are not that familiar with a full melt, when your piece leaves no residue, no black chunk, no ash, you're working with full melt, and that's usually not so easy to produce, not so easy to make. You have to know how to make it. Mark, you know, you just touched on something real interesting, man, because there's a big intersection between breeding and what you do, right? You just can't grow any plant that grows any type of trichome head and just get the best hash in the world, right?
No, not at all.
So brother, I got a question for you, man, because I know you worked around Ryan Lee and a bunch of really big names for a really long time. What if you had to pick 5 cultivars, bro, that would be your all-time 5 cultivars to run for hash? What would they be?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I mean, I am obviously a huge lover of the Haze. I love the
Yeah.
terpene dominant cultivars. That being said, of course, Haze is going to be in that group, and it could be in that group in a variety of ways. It could be an amnesia haze. It could be a where is my bike. It could be a ghost train haze. In fact, that's one of my favorites. Rare dankness. Shout out to Scott. I love strawberry banana to take it to a more fruity kind of
Yes.
different flavor profile. DNA genetics. Shout out to Don and Aaron because that strawberry banana is absolutely stupendous. I really like cookies and cream from Exotic Genetics. Shout out to Mike for doing such a great job on that. The bubble from that cookies and cream is just, it's almost hard to describe. It's so tasty and so lovely. What
A lot of people
else?
hate on the flower, you know, but I like to tell people that so many of these things that were designed, they were designed specifically for hash making, man. Don't
Yeah,
hate on that
exactly.
flower. I used to do that, you know, like hashes, right?
Oh yeah,
Cookies and
absolutely.
cream.
So
Yeah.
also a gas, you know, we're going to need a cushion there, and that could be, oh God, it could be any of the cakes, you know, the ice cream cake, the wedding cake. There's so many nice varieties of that. I also really love the apricot, you know, in a
Oh,
variety of, you know, it's also been crossed left, right, and center.
apricot
Geez,
kush. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Apricot Kush, but there's so many cuts of that now that have been crossed and made into beautiful things. And then, of course, to take it way, way back, I had a huge affinity and appreciation for the Renee. I loved the fruity flavor of the flower, but I loved how when you exhaled it, it just smelled like haze and a real narrow leaf drug cultivar in the air. So I think I named 6, but yeah, those would all be great.
So, you know, Marcus, that, you know, you really illustrated something. You were leaning a lot on the narrow leaf cultivars. And you know how people out there say that there's absolutely nothing to indica and sativa. And I like to remind people that the mythology around indica and sativa is not as clear cut as that. Because clearly, if a man like you has a preference for a particular type of, let's say, a particular type of general gene pool, right? Well, and you and I know that those 2 different gene pools, for example, if we're going to run a Kush or if we're going to run an original haze, we're going to expect a much lighter coloration off of our original haze than off of most of our Kush lines, right, Marcus?
Yeah, they're going to be very different from not just the way they look, but the way they smell and the way they react to, you know, our endocannabinoid system. They're very different, not so much in cannabinoid contents, but the terpene profile is the real differentiator.
Mm-hmm. And you know that, so that's why I like to tell people that remember that, yes, like indica and sativa is mostly a mythology in the context of today because most things are hybrids. But remember that there are regional variants, and people like Marcus are the kind of folks that taught me, at least, that I was to expect a different end quality depending on the type of cultivar, depending on the size of the trichome head, depending on the type of terpenes that are inside of that trichome head. So yeah, man, one of those points that I think is oftentimes overlooked. People are like, there's nothing to it. And I'm like, hold on. If we're getting different color and an overall different quality out of our extracts, in particular traditional extracts, there is something to it. It's just not the way that, you know, industry leaders like maybe Leafly like to represent as a clear cut up and down. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, man, super interesting to know that you're leaning a little bit more towards the narrow leaf, right? Because you mentioned like the Kush at the end. You haven't mentioned like any blueberries, not too many cheeses. You're more like, you like the hazy, right? Oh.
I like it all, I'll be honest, but
Gotcha.
the hazes are always going to be my favorite. I still enjoy, I mean, for me, I want to have a strong, heavy hitting Kush because guess what? Me hitting a haze right before bed makes zero to any sense. And I've done it many times when I was all over the Where Is My Bike, which is a biker kush crossed with amnesia haze, and the amnesia in that shit just keeps you awake. It's just like I can't. And you know, I wake up very early. I'm a 5 a.m. riser. I'm at my lab by 6:30 a.m. I'm working here for my 8 to 10 hour shift every day, and I need to get my sleep. And so it's very important to use, sort of, for me, to use the right genetics for the right time. You know, it's not going to serve me well to smoke powerful, heavy indicas in the middle of the day when I have a lot of work to do and I need to be about my wits. Just like it won't serve me well to try and go to bed at 10 o'clock at night when I've been chain smoking Where's My Bike resin.
You know, yeah. And you know what's weird, Mark, that for me, I just can't smoke anything right before bed, bro. Like, if any, especially like a really heavy kush, it's so bizarre how a haze makes me feel hazy, man. Like in the morning, it'll make me feel really like a little bit rushy at the beginning, but then I crash hard. I think it's because I'm used to smoking kush a lot. I'm not used to smoking a lot of narrow leaf, like Congo, that kind of stuff. So I think it's also, you know, what your body's used to. And for a man like you, I think you're used to everything, bro.
Dude, it's all in my stash all the time. I always have all of these things in my stash. I've got like 10 or 15 kinds at any given time. And
Dude, I've hung out with you before, bro. You don't need to tell me, man. Like, it's always, whenever I hang with you, I'm like, what you got? What am I tasting today? It's like, you know, I'm always tasting something different. I remember back in the day, bro, you used to roll with some Astro Boy. In fact, you have some of those pictures up online. Astro Boy, for those of you that don't know, one of the guys that I followed big time was Subcool. He taught me like so many things. May he rest in peace. He was a fantastic mentor. He designed, is that right, dude? That's mostly GTA work? Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. You know,
Okay.
Subcool ended up in Manitoba for a short stint, and he actually got into some trouble and he ended up
Yeah.
in jail.
Yeah, I heard about
My
that.
friend, Bad Boy,
Yeah.
was like helping him out and taking care of things and said, hey, I'll take care of the grow and I'll watch things for you. What happened during that time was one of the Ortegas, I don't know if it was a male that ended up pollinating the females or if the Ortega hermaphrodited. I don't know exactly that. We'd have to ask Bad Boy, but somehow this Ortega pollinated an Apollo 13, and that became the Astro Boy. Of course, Astro Boy was so fruity and stacking calyxes, very foxtailish, the opposite of PGR buds that look like rocks, you know. And everyone called it watermelon. Everyone just called it watermelon, and
turned
so
into watermelon, right?
it turned into watermelon. Yeah. So people
Yeah.
were like, oh, it's the watermelon. And I'd be like, the watermelon. And I was a huge proponent of that cultivar. I gave it away to dozens of people, including all the well-known people in the industry, from the Remos and the Johnny B's. I wanted to make sure that they had access to it at least. And it's not everyone's favorite by any means, but man, that is a strong, heavy-hitting, super flavorful, full melt resin.
Buddy, I'll never forget the toke of Astro Boy you gave me, dude. You like, fuck, you don't even remember this shit. Because this was like back in I think it was at Mark Emery's joint or something like that. And dude, you rocked my world with that Astro Boy. You know what's weird, dude? That then I had the flower and I was like, I fucking hate this thing. I was like, I'm not gonna grow it. Fuck this. I don't know how to make that amazing resin this dude was smoking. Yeah, man. Some things are, you know, they're just best served by being extracted, turned into full melt, man. There's so many cultivars that are like that. I also feel that way about like the mountain jams, the shishka berries. Like, I feel like, you know,
E4.
Yeah, bro, exactly. All that old school yummy yum stuff that was good when you had it in a hash. And if you did not have it in hash, like I grew shits in a shishka berry, man, the market just wouldn't love it. My body wasn't liking it. You know, that's why flower smokers, they tend to go, you know, if you get heavy, at least in this region, into flower, you tend to end up in the Kush area, in the gas. You chase the gas because that's where most of us heavy smokers end up. But when you're like Marcus and you're dabbing full melt, your range of appreciation goes, and all of a sudden you can be tasting flavors from all types of different genetics that actually, you know, are better suited maybe for your body, for some people's body. I'll be frank with you, Marcus. Dabs make me a little bit too on edge, and they make me burnt. And so funny because probably for you, as well as for most of my dab compadres, they say that flour makes them feel burnt. Isn't that interesting, man?
I haven't smoked flower in a long time, but what I find with dabs is that people try to keep up with people when it comes to dabs instead of just figuring out what's good for them, because dabs, if you're taking more than you can really enjoy, then you're going to get foggy, you're going to get burnt out from it. But what I've told a lot of people is if you just take the macro amounts of what you're taking, you may find that same effect that you're getting from flower with a cleaner, clear, sort of more unadulterated cannabinoid and terpene experience, but that one that doesn't kind of burn you out. And I wanted to tell a quick story on the C4 because we mentioned Chimera. Yeah. I was in Winnipeg about 20 years ago, and I was visiting a gentleman by the name of Reggie the Roddy, and his name's Al in real life. But Reggie the Roddy was an internet guy that bought bags. He said, "Hey, if you're in Winnipeg, come by my house. I made some nice bubble." Yeah. And in fact, I actually went and made the bubble with him. We made some C4 that he grew, and I'll never forget. I barely knew this guy at all, and I'm sitting at his kitchen table, and we're like, "Well, let's have a dab. Let's smoke some of this." And so he smoked some of this bubble hash. And I'm telling you, man, for about a half an hour, the two of us were so uncomfortably high. We didn't really know each other. So I just sat in his kitchen, all kind of like, oh, okay. And afterwards, he was just like, bro, you don't understand. That's harder than hard drugs. That's harder than that is crazy. I've never in my life been that high in my life.
What
shout out to Chimera.
What's in that C4? Is it Cinderella line or what is it? Is it a Cindy?
I have to look real quick.
Yeah. So if you don't remember
because it's been so long since I saw it, but that sounds about right. It's like
he was working with a lot of Cindy's back then, and so was Subcool. So was everyone, right? Back in the day, Cindy's were just fucking hot, man. So I don't know, maybe.
Totally. What we got here. So we got, yeah, go ahead. It's, of course, the 3 pages I open up don't say anything about the lineage of the cultivar, which is amazing because that's what Seed Finder and Leafly generally do. But we'll just keep going and we'll go to IC Mag. Let's see if they have.
IC Mag, for those of you who don't know, is an old school resource that actually originally helped me hook up with all of these kinds of folks. Remo, Johnny B, Ryan Lee, Bubbleman, they're all on there throwing down. And in fact, those 4, man, there's a lot of other people, dude, but those 4 names for me, those were my top. If anything you guys were writing, I was reading it. Any video you were pumping, I was watching it. And I suggest that our audience considers going back and doing that. Because one of the questions I have on this list for you, bro, is what is your favorite bubble hash tutorial that you've recorded to this day? Because you've got so many, dude. And so many are so good. I told you I love that one with Johnny B. What's your personal favorite, man? Can you speak to that so people can go check it out after the show? Get a full.
It's cotton candy. It's cotton candy crossed with shishkaberry. It's cotton candy crossed with shishkaberry. I just had to get that out.
Yeah, but the original
and the shishkaberry. And I'm not sure if he used Chimera's cotton candy. He was the one that bred it, so it's his, right? He had only probably bred it a year or 2 before the C4. So, and I'm not sure if he used the red line or the yellow line on the shishkaberry, but there were 2 Afghani lines on that shishkaberry. So my favorite, geez, that's hard to say. That's really hard to say. I always my favorite one is the one I haven't done yet. It's the because I've done so many, and there's a few that I've done big ones on YouTube that are now 5 or 6 or 7 years old. So they always need updating, and it's so much time. I'm such a perfectionist. I always want everything to be perfect. I always want to have the perfect material lined up and this, that, and the other thing. So it's not always that easy to do, but I would have to say that it's the next one that I'm going to do is going to be my favorite.
So people, that just means make sure you're following Bubbleman on YouTube and go check out all of his old videos. Just pop in Bubbleman into your search engine. You're going to see what happens. There's a question here from one of the members of one of the attendees. Daniel Morris is asking if you have a favorite terpene. Do you have a favorite terpene, Marcus? What's your answer to that? a
Well, I'm a
favorite?
huge fan of terpenes, the way I'm this huge fan of people. I'm really not prejudiced. I like all the shapes and colors and sizes of people, and I'm kind of the same way with terpenes. But okay, favorite terpenes. I mean, I have a real appreciation for terpenoline. I have a
Ah,
real appreciation for alpha pinene, not necessarily for the flavor profile of alpha pinene, but for the memory aspect of alpha pinene. When I hit a lot of myrcene without alpha pinene, I get forgetful.
oh yeah.
I forget my keys, and I hate. As great as that is for PTSD, unlocking and releasing memories that you're holding so strongly, they don't really serve a type A personality who's working for companies simultaneously and all of these things.
So people, again, for those of you who missed that, he just gave away a really important piece of information for those of you who are into terpenes. First of all, the man says he likes terpenoline, and remember, he leans a little bit more towards narrow leaf cultivars. Those tropical cultivars are the ones that are more likely to have a terpenoline dominant profile. Mind you, for me, terpenoline is murder, man. Like anything that's really terpenoline dominant, I'm like, no, no. My body's like, hell no, get it away from me. And you know what's crazy, dude? Even opening the jar, I even just smell the jar. My body's like, no, bro, don't do it. For me, here's the second part of what Marcus said, and I'm not sure if all of you caught this. When myrcene is in high dominance, maybe you've got a nice amount of beta-caryophyllene occurring there, hopefully not beta-caryophyllene oxide, for God's sakes, but a nice hit of beta-caryophyllene oxide, of beta-caryophyllene, and you do not have any alpha-pinene occurring in that concoction. For example, if you have a heavy bubba that's very myrcene dominant, and bubbas can have plenty of alpha-pinene, but that's depending on which specific pheno, if you selected it that way or not. Alpha pinene really helps to balance out your stone, making you, for a lot of people, yes, less forgetful, but they generally just feel less intoxicated. And for any of you that want some academic data that supports the perspective that Marcus just spoke to and that I completely am in line with, you can go to Ethan Russo's most recent publication from 2018. He actually uses cultivars from Ryan Lee, and they run some models looking at how people react to different basic flavor profiles, the myrcene dominant profile, the terpenoline dominant flavor profile, beta-caryophyllene dominant profile. So I recommend, in fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put that publication in the email that goes as a follow-up to you joining us for the session. So make sure that if you haven't submitted your email to CannaReps at the CannaReps website, make sure you do that, because we don't actually pump your mailbox full of junk. We give you follow-up educational stuff like what we're going to give you here. And thanks to my man Marcus here. Marcus, brother, let me see if I got any more questions for you.
I know you do.
Are you able to see the chat group right now, Mark? Oh, you're not
is the
actually
chat
on
group on? Is it on YouTube right now?
It is on the YouTube channel.
I'll
But you know
go
what,
check
bro?
it out.
I'm gonna go in between a little bit. Here we go. The C4, somebody says, had a lot of red pistols. Is that according to your recollection as well, Marcus? C4 was just red as hell. It would make sense maybe if it was. Are you muted? No. Hello? Oh no, you're frozen.
But it's
You're back. You're back.
frozen. Oh.
Well, seems like we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty with Mark. He's gonna pop back in there. Let's see if we get you back in. There you are.
Well, I'm here to open. I went to open YouTube chat, and that slowed everything down. So give me a second. I'll mute it. And,
you know what, Mark? It's really making me break up a lot. I can work as intermediary, but yeah, if you can get it going, get it going. Otherwise, don't stress so much. I've got a bunch of stuff to go through here because, brother, you're not only somebody that helped to get us to where we are today, but I've always said to people, you know, because I'll be frank with you, folks that are new to the industry that haven't like hung out with the magnitude of individual that an OG like yourself is, they don't really know how much you had to do to get us here today. And I've always said that where we're going it's gonna, like, we're not gonna really understand to what extent voices like yours are gonna get us to where we're going. So I really want to talk about what you're doing at Embark Health, and I want to talk about the category of full melt, where it's going, and maybe as a little preface to that, you know that there's a lot of people that are doing ice hash right now because they're getting big yields off of their ice hash runs, and they're even using the same technology that you developed and sold, bubble bags with ice hash instead of water. What do you have to say to all these people who think that that's the future of where things are going? What do you think about that? Hold on, Mark.
Using
there you go. Yeah.
Is okay. Else, I'm not.
Brother, I think you're cutting in and out. I think you should close the other window. I've got the same problem. Bad internet feed. Give that window a close, man.
Closing them all.
Yeah, there we go.
Unbelievable.
Now I can hear you. Yeah, man.
Excellent. I didn't really understand your question about people using water and ice to make their hash.
Yeah, no. I was saying that some people right now, for example, I pose a general question of where you think the category is going and the new developments that will happen within the category. And then I brought up the point that a lot of folks are looking into ice hash. So basically running dry ice without water, just bumping around the buds with their dry ice and getting big yields off of it. People are really excited.
Yeah. You never mentioned dry. That's
No. Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about that.
Dry ice is terrible. It's horrible. It's the worst. It's the best way to explain to someone how disconnected you are from understanding anything and everything that's going on, because water hash keeps everything afloat. Dry ice breaks everything up and it all falls through the screen. And it's why people think it's great, because they see these yields, because they're unaware of the yields being 90% contaminant. They just think it's great. It dumped, bro. I can't believe how much I got. And it's like, well, that's because only 10% of it is active. You've actually taken the bud and you've diluted it more than the flower itself was diluted, which is almost like a talent, really. How do you make bud worse than bud?
Well,
you add dry ice.
You know, it's crazy because I almost had some people talk me into giving it a big try with a bunch of dry stuff that I had, some personal for my 4 plants. And you're the man who saved me from ruining my batch, because you know that I love hash, but I'm by no means an expert hashish maker, you know? So I always look to people like you, say, hey man, should I be doing this with my bud? The answer, people, is no, don't do it. Just don't do it.
Bubble makes everyone an expert, you know, like it's so simple. It's a recipe. You just follow it. As long as you have great material, you'll have great hash that comes out. And it's funny because hash makers who get congratulations for being incredible hash makers, 9 out of 10 times have really done nothing other than follow the simple instructions and, more importantly, be given exceptional material. Or perhaps they grew that material themselves, which I give them a huge props for. But we are the unveilers of the flame. We are not the growers of the flame. We just unveil it.
Yeah, you're like
shout out to the growers.
I've always said it's like a DJ a little bit, because the hash maker, once you've got your method reel down, then you're going to select that track that sounded the best to you, because you're going to share that with the world. And obviously you're going to adjust the volume knobs and get the sound just the way you want it. But you're bringing through the work of one of the masters, usually, if you're picking it, you know. And I definitely feel that way about Ryan locally. That guy is like, man, every time I talk to him, I learn something new. The same way with you, Mark. So here's a question, bro, because this is, you know, I had an argument with somebody a few weeks ago when I was talking about this dry ice point that you actually taught me. And this person was like, well, you know what, Adolfo? Old school hash also has a shit ton of green matter and contaminants. And they're like, and lots of people prefer that product format rather than highly purified full melt. And, you know, so I got thinking, I was like, is traditional hashish always going to be a category? Yeah, that's the answer to the question, right? But let's say, you know, to that point, if you get fire flower and you make a traditional hashish run, not a bubble hash run, more traditional hashish, maybe a sieve like Mexicanos. You know, we like to put it on the sieve, and then it all comes down. All the little chunks break off at the bottom, and then we'll press it together and we'll heat it a little bit, and that's our Mexican hash, very low quality hash that we make, right? Maybe the lowest quality hash from any traditional producing culture is the Mexican one, I have to argue.
But do you remember Mexi Melt?
Well, no, dude. Mexi Melt from Oaxaca was a different. You know, the guys from DF couldn't get that shit. They used to send that only to the gringos, dude. From your Mexico City, you're trying to get the melty melt from Oaxaca. They sell to the fucking gringos to the border, make way more money, dude. Like, unfortunately, most of the good Mexican weed doesn't even fucking stay in our country. So we're always starved. We have to make it ourselves. That's why your bubble bags change.
Well, that's it. You make it yourself. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to rely on anyone. Go get the herb. Kilos are cheap.
Watch the video. Go to Canada, get your bags, or order them from Canada. I don't know if they make it through the border nowadays, but back in the day, we used to fly to Canada to get it, bro. I'm not even kidding you.
Ours make it through the border. We have harmonization codes with different countries. Our bags are 150% legal. Multitask filtration kits. We don't have a problem shipping them anywhere.
Well, isn't that hilarious though, that I've had friends of mine that literally take a trip to Vancouver to go to your store and to get their bags and to bring them back and their bags with them.
Well, that's the pilgrimage, you know, that's like, that's the pilgrimage. It's also like, that's a special thing to do as well. And then you go back and you're like, I went up to Canada, I met the Bubbleman, I got the bags, and now we're going to do this. It's like, someone needs to do that.
Every one of those kids becomes an apostle for you. You know that, man?
Someone in chat just said the worst hash was the Jamaican. I would just like to say the best hash I've ever had in my life was the Jamaican that I made there. So yeah, well, not Jamaican gum. I make hash way better than that. But you're right. Jamaican gum was strong.
It was,
but listen, you got to make your own hash. It's very easy when you go to these countries to bring a 5-gallon bag set with you, or even a 1 gallon. You know, if you just want to whip off an ounce or two and get a couple of grams for your trip, it's pretty easy.
I have to say that I agree with you. The genetics that are on that island and how they render in hashish form is fucking spectacular, man. Like, fucking spectacular. There's just some flavors on that island, I think you know, dude, that are like, it's got some ness to it. The Jamaican ness, you know, and the stone as well. I don't know exactly what biochemicals to attribute that difference to just yet. I don't know if you know more about that, Marcus, but I noticed how different the more land racy type of stuff from that island was hitting my body. Obviously how different it looks, that's no fucking question. I mean,
well, look at the terroir. It's the only country
red soil,
the
red soil
Caribbean.
with the limestone base. Yeah.
The only country in the Caribbean that is surrounded by the Caribbean Sea on all 4 corners. There is not another country in the Caribbean that has the Caribbean Sea going all the way around the island. So this creates a unique terroir that no other countries in the Caribbean have.
It looks different, doesn't it, Marcus? As soon as you look at it, you're like, damn, it's so red. It's not just red, it's red soil on top of limestone base. And then all of the people, I don't think they've ever thrown away a tire in the history of that island, eh, Marcus? Every single grower is growing in tires. They put the tires down to hold the red soil in place. And I've wondered how much that tire situation contributes to the you know, those roots are gonna bind to that thing, eh? Like, I wonder if there's ever any problem with a damn tire leaching or anything, or changing.
I'm not a big fan. I don't smoke the tire grown stuff. That's no bueno.
I know, man. It's everywhere, dude. That's one of the big problems that I saw with the local farmers, even the very, very heavy ones, do the tire method there.
Another tip for farmers in a lot of these countries, Jamaica being one of them, is when you go to a field,
What?
Out of sight. And
you're cutting out a little bit, Marcus. I think you're back.
Sorry, not sure why.
You're back.
Great internet. I have like full internet right now.
You're back. You're back. You're back fully.
Yeah, it's strange why I would have like a bad connection, because I'm like super connected right now on the internet. Like, my, sorry.
It's all good, man. It's possibly got something to do on my end as well. I don't know why, but I always blame myself for these things.
Well, we'll fix it.
Yeah, man. So basically, you're saying that when people try the good stuff, when people try cleaner stuff at a price that was comparable to what they used to pay for dirtier stuff with more green matter, you think that those product categories will be eventually, they will become redundant, right? You don't think that there's a particular category of consumer that really wants all the green matter in there, that wants only 10% active. Hey, Marcus, you know, like that old hippie hash they used to sell, man, like the pressed.
I mean, it's hard to say. A lot more people drink Coors Light than IPA beer. So like most people in the world go for the mediocre to the below mediocre. So I suspect those will always be the largest markets in everything, you know, in food, in vehicles, in clothes, in everything. Because it's like the majority of the people in the world just can't afford these things. Like I can't afford to buy the nicest vehicle in the world. I can't afford to live in the nicest house in the world. I can't afford to buy, I don't buy $1,000 t-shirts. You know what I mean? Like I buy like $20 t-shirts. And so I think it's the same with a lot of things, right? Like people would love to eat organic food, but the cost is so outrageous nowadays that it's like, it's outside of most people's ability to just be able to purchase great organic food. So you see a lot of people decide, I got to grow my own food. I got to figure this out, you know, and they do the same thing with cannabis and hashes because it's very expensive to try and buy. And as you know, it's not even really available for sale.
Yeah, well, like you said it, brother. It's a world where we need to build more infrastructure so that those things can become more affordable and accessible for all, including the top grade cannabis. I always tell folks that if you think that you can remove terpenes from the equation and give me a really dry, flavorless flower and expect that to take care of the pain that I treat on a daily basis, I know from experience it's just not going to work for me. There might not be a lot of data behind that proves it, but I can tell you with a great degree of assurity that, yeah, man, like having affordable in Jamaica and in Mexico, you know, it's really something that really sticks out to me because think about Mexico, like if you sell for the prices we sell and you regulate the way that we regulate, no Mexican will be able to afford in their own country. And that's actually what's happening in Jamaica right now. One of the big objectives that the company in Jamaica that's hiring me and Mike has is to lower price points sufficiently while maintaining quality standards that Jamaicans will actually want to walk into a dispensary in their country and spend their money there, you know, because it's been so built and with price points and with approaches that have been for foreigners and for tourists. Very few times do we build a regulation system that is made for locals, made to benefit locals. And honestly, I think that Jamaica probably has one of the best shots because they do have one of the regulation systems that's the most inclusive as far as I've seen. Not as inclusive as it needs to be, but it's getting there, you know?
Well, it's also that, you know, they're not going to be able to ever afford that herb that's sold in shops for $7 and $8 and $10 a gram. Those are tourist prices. These guys spend like a couple bucks on a big bag of weed that lasts a week, man.
Exactly. $1 to $2 to $3 on the gram is what a local Mexican is used to paying, what a local Jamaican is used to paying. That's what we pay for weed in the tropics. Anybody that tries to come in and say, all of a sudden it's twice as much, it's never going to work. That regulation.
Or 10 times. How about 10 times?
Dude, $20 on the fucking gram in Jamaica or Mexico is like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, who is this for? Is fine herb not meant for those of low resources? And I mean, yeah.
Well, it is. In fact, if you look at a caste system like India, you know, you see people constantly like, oh, that's for janitors, you know, like, oh, that's for, it's called the poor man's drug. And it's like, I don't look at that as an insult. I look at that as like, awesome. It's like, yeah, that is the poor man's drug. Like the poor man needs something as well. And it's like, let's not take this thing and make it so inaccessible and so expensive that suddenly the poor man can't access or get that anymore, you know? So it is a worrisome thing that as we, you know, prohibition pricing was based on people doing multiple decades in jail and losing their freedom. And that's how prices got to $3,000 and $4,000 a pound. cannabis does not cost that much more to grow than tomatoes, regardless of who's trying to convince you otherwise. Now, there is huge uptick on products in the cannabis world. You buy anything to grow cannabis, and it's going to cost you like 5 times more than it would cost if you just went to an actual store to purchase agricultural equipment to grow corn or whatever. So we are kind of trapped in this little box. It's unfortunate because those who are more vulnerable and those who have less are the ones who suffer from those pathways.
Yeah, and I mean, the big part of the picture that I think we also forget about here in Canada is that even here in Canada, most of the people that are involved in the underground industry are actually subsistence farmers. They're growing not because they're buying a fucking Ferrari. They're growing because they got to pay the bills and feed their family, man. Like, that's the bulk of the market here. And in a place like Jamaica or Mexico, that's not just the bulk of the market. That's, sorry, not the bulk of the producers. That's 99.9% of the producers in a place like Jamaica and Mexico. So when we build a regulatory system in which you have to build a bank safe with 2 meter, with a meter thick wall that costs so much money to build, just that part, never mind the other infrastructure, security, the overlaying taxes, you cut out all of these people that were using the poor man's drug to subsist. And then we give it over to people that were already making money in other places. They just want a funner career path. And I just think that that's fucking bullshit. It's just, there's no place for that in the year 2021. We need to wake up and realize that if we replicate our method of regulating in Mexico and India and Jamaica, we're gonna mess the world up. So we need to be a little bit more humble, I think, here, because we're always like, oh, we're the most advanced regulatory speaking. Yes, we are the most advanced. That's not up for debate. But are our rules applicable to all other sectors of the world? And did we build a truly inclusive system that was primarily focused on reconciliation with those affected by the drug war, or were we focused primarily on making money? What was this about? So I think that this is the big moment in history that we are in right now, where, again, Marcus, people like yourself, bro, and the perspectives that you taught me to have on cannabis, I came from a very classist society, bro. I didn't grow up seeing all that shit. I had to leave Canada. I had to sit down and shut the fuck up and listen to folks like you to really get my brain to open up and go, hey, I'm part of something that's actually not that cool, socially speaking, something that needs to be resolved, right? And cannabis can be a tool for that because it's already a tool to put food on the table for all the poor people in the world that are involved with it. And it's not just gangsters. And let me tell you that. And even a lot of the gangsters are still pretty damn poor and suffering, as far as I can tell you, because I have actually met a lot of individuals in that world, and it's not always as glamorous when you're not at the top. The top is really fucking small, and all those boys at the bottom, they're not very wealthy people. They're not very prestigious people. Anyways, not to get too into the politics, brother, I want to hear more about Embark Health, and I want to hear about where you see this thing going, what type of new innovations you're working on. I want to know what you're up to, man.
I'm just trying to set a bar that's up high instead of on the ground. And since being in the legal regulated system, it just seems like one company after another seems like that is the good idea. So I'm very happy that our team at Embark sees that as not the pathway to go to. That's not our interest. We want to make really great product. You know, when every company sits in the boardroom and they say, hey, you know, we want to be a differentiator, like, how can we differentiate ourselves? And then there's like a guy with long hair in the back, and he's like, well, you know, if you grow quality and get good genetics and use people from the legacy market, well, we don't want to hear that. We just want to know how we can be a differentiator. Someone send that long-haired guy out of the room. And it's like, well, that long-haired guy actually just literally answered your question to perfection. But those companies that are unwilling to do it will be the ones who race to the bottom to set the bar on the ground, you know, selling hash that looks like floor sweepings instead of really being proud of what you're doing and really being like, you know, putting something out there. Like for me, as a hash maker, I'm limited to the quality of herb I can find. So right off the bat, my focus is to find great quality herb in the legal Canadian, you know, industry. So that's step number one. Most they don't have the awareness for it, and they don't really even seem to want to do it there. And the way extraction works in Canada is if you call a company up and say, hey, we want to get some material, they're like, hey, Bob, what's in the back of the vault that we can't sell? We got some extractors that want to do extra. And I'm like, no. So it's going to be this education of like, let's find the best cultivars that have high terpene contents and people who are aware and have great understanding of growing, and hopefully are growing in living soils organically, biodynamically, regeneratively. These are all amazing things that we have to at least lean towards getting there if we're not there right away. And, you know, those are kind of the focuses. Then combine that with exceptional hash making, where we are super hyper aware. We are like, I can't even tell you how aware the team is here when we make hash. And our product will show that, you know, in when it hits the shops. People will see the purity, they'll see the potency. And yeah, we're just really proud to kind of get a product out there, to get products out there, because certainly we're not just going to be releasing hash. We'll be releasing dry sift and bubble hash, pressed sift, rosin, you know, terpene profiles eventually, and then a whole line of all of the other products that can be made through monomolecular isolation, distillation, short path distillation. All of these products are, you know, we have a company that we absorbed recently. We did a reverse takeover called Axiom, which was a nano emulsification company, which is now called Embark Nano. You can check it out at embarknano.com. And so, you know, for those of you that don't have a full understanding of nano emulsification, it's kind of like coating a molecule with a cover of surfactant that creates a sort of emulsification. It seems like it's soluble in water, even though it's not. And there's a lot of companies that are working on this. This technology started in pharmaceutical industry. Yeah, it's very interesting to see where it's going to go. We're excited to have our hands in some sort of cutting edge stuff. And of course, in regards to hash making, eventually I want to be releasing pure dry sift that's 99.9%. I want to release things into the Canadian market that the Canadian market has never seen. Yes. So let's start with our first hash. It's going to be an Afghan Kush. It's going to be done under the Hank brand. I went last week all around the island, Vancouver Island, as well as in Vancouver, and I went to a bunch of different shops, which I really got to give the shops a shout out. I was impressed. I was impressed by a couple of stores, which may surprise you. I was impressed with the government store. I mean, okay, let's go first off. The most impressive store I was impressed with was the farmhouse in Vancouver. And those guys were exceptional. But what I was blown away by at the BC cannabis stores, and I only talked to the girl for a short period of time, I was blown away at her level of knowledge. And she told me, yeah, actually the BC cannabis stores, the one thing they really got right was that they hire people from the legacy market. I thought, okay, well, that's kind of cool. Now, on the flip side of that, is it cool to have a shop when you're the government who is the distributor of the product, to be able to have a shop that has everything in the shop, and to fund that shop with your competitors' tax that they're paying on all the product that they're selling? That left a little bit of a bad feeling or a bad taste in my mouth. But the shops have a ton of stuff in them, the government shops, and they do have legacy people working there. Now, the other shop I was blown away that had that was Dutch Love. And I had no idea that Dutch Love was actually Hobo previously. All I knew about Hobo was every time I went onto the Twitter or any social media, all that anyone wrote was change your fucking name. Change your fucking name. Like 100 times in a row. I was like,
I know, dude. I saw it too.
Survive. I was like, they won't survive. Well, they survived. They are now called Dutch Love, which I don't think is the best name. The people there were all legacy people working in those shops and had a very deep understanding of cannabis and cannabis as, you know, a recreational enjoyment.
Yeah, that's Rohan's old crew. I don't know if you ever met my old buddy Rohan. He sold his to Donnelly Group, and they kept a lot of the original employees, although Rohan's no longer with them. But yeah, dude, it's that the shop, I mean, despite the new group that came in, I don't really want to speak to that much. I think you know how I feel about Donnelly Group and their cultural impact on our city. But that crew of people and that establishment, the green, they used to be that place. I think you visited would have been the old Green Cross. Was that the location, bro, that you went to?
It's possible. I ended up at a couple of them. I also want to shout out Dude, I went to 50 shows.
Okay.
So. I do want to also shout out THC, which was really, really
Oh,
great.
yeah.
Obviously, they were legacy. They were probably like the #1 for full blown understanding. And shout out to Snacky. You know, he
Yeah,
was
big time.
recently killed out in front of that place, and I spoke with his brother, the owner of THC, and I just want to. Say that was terrible, and that our thoughts are with them. And if you're, if you want to support those guys, they've got a great thing going on with THC and both Dankmart, which is right next door.
Yeah, Snacky really lives on there, man. They've always known their bud. That crew of boys always knew their bud. They always had great bud on the counter, and nothing has changed after transition. I strongly recommend people head down there, the village. There's several places that I really love that made transition. Huge shout out to all the people that made transition. May there be many, many more. Dude, you've given us so much. So do you think basically that I saw that you were doing some head separation in Embark. I saw it on your webpage. Can you speak a little bit more about that method and why it's so important for you to separate out the different size of trichome heads and potencies?
Well, I mean, I've always done it with bubble bags. It's a great way to sort of isolate the profile, isolate different effects sometimes. Of course, it's not something we're allowed to talk about in the legal, we're not allowed to talk about medical and all of this, but from a personal standpoint, I've always seen different aspect change from, like for instance, making hash, hitting 90 micron, passing out unconscious, it just knocking me out and being like, oh, I kind of was hoping on like this being an appetite stimulant. Well, all of a sudden you hit the 45 micron, you're not passing out, but you are getting a little bit of that appetite stimulation. So I always kind of point that towards people, like, look at your resin heads, isolate them into different bags. Once you've isolated them, you can always mix them back together for the full profile or full spectrum or whatever you think is the best. Really bioassay and try. Don't just listen blindly and choose a side as we do as humans often. There's value on both sides of the fence. So, sometimes I love smoking pure microns. Sometimes I'll take multiple microns and mix it up. And so, for instance, with Hank, we released 2 grades, a grade A and a grade B. Grade A is almost 70%. It was 120, 90, 73, and 45. Grade B, and all of these grades were blonde and quite beautiful looking, surprisingly. Grade B, which is also over 60%, was 25 micron, 160, and 190. So 160 and 190 are usually almost unsmokable. So the fact that we made a B grade that's in the 60%, higher than 90% of the hashes that are available in the market right now, I think says a lot about our abilities and our capabilities.
Marcus, you're so spoiled. You say the 160 to 190 is almost unsmokable. Dude, you should have what we get in Mexico most of the time, man. But yeah, you're right. You're right. By the way, for those of you out there who are confused about what he's saying, 75s, 45s, 190s, micron size. To put that into perspective, 1 micron is 1,000th. Oh my God, I can't speak. 1,000th of a millimeter. So it's like 20 microns are like the head of a human hair. It's tiny, 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 tiny. And Marcus, you just said something in case people out there missed it, because you really actually just opened my eyes to something. You're saying the same cultivar being run through, let's say that you're doing a broadleaf cultivar, that you're getting the top, like best quality at the 120 range, the 90 to 120 range, okay? And you're saying that everything that's slightly on the higher edge and on the lower edge of that is providing you a slightly different psychotropical effect. That's correct, right, Marcus?
It's why I created all the different bags, right? The bags were 2 bags originally when they were isolator bags. When Bubble Bag came out, we went from 3, 4, 5, 6, right up to 8 in a very short period of time because of the R&D we were doing with the screens. And when we isolated the resin out, and actually smoked it, you notice these different effects. And so, yeah, of course, what I suggest to people is not to take anything I say as the word of God, but go out and bioassay yourself and see what you notice when you isolate your microns out of your hash.
And people, remember that isolating your microns out might sound super technical and scientific, but really when you buy a set of bubble bags, just follow the instructions and you're gonna get your separated heads, depending on which bag. You have your, I think you're not doing 75s anymore, right, Marcus? You do like 73 to 74. I think you had something like that. And then the
The
next
bag
step
is 73.
yeah, there you go.
The bag is 73.
Yeah,
Do
73.
you want to know why?
Tell me why it wasn't 75, but why you did 73. Tell me, yeah.
I was born in 1973.
Oh, you thought you were going to give me a way more technical answer than that, you bastard.
No, that's all the companies that copy the screen bags. Generally, most of them just buy 70 micron screens. So they'll have the 220 and the 190 and the 160 and the 120 and the 90 and the 70. And often people say, why is yours a 73? Is it really that much better? And I'm like, well, no, it's the year I was born in. I got to have a couple of little Easter eggs in there.
So I like that. It's like your authorship, bro, in the code, you know? Very nice. Very, very nice. No, the answer to that question.
I got a
always
quick one.
intrigued. Sorry?
Oh, no, I was just going to mention to Face Like Thunder. It was like, he's like, can we talk about the water bottle? You probably have noticed I've been drinking from this flat bottle. I got to give it a quick shout out. These guys are conscious when you purchase these memo bottles, and it is called Memo Bottle. They're in Australia. They basically they donate to water.org, and they create fresh, clean water for one person for each bottle for 3 months. Wow. And so it goes back to shopping with your dollar in a conscious way. Obviously, this is still a plastic bottle, but it's going to reduce the amount of plastic bottles that I purchase and consume because I'm going to be reusing this quite a bit. I just got it the other day, and I also love it. Fits in a backpack, and I'm sure maybe one day I'll be carrying a bunch of these into the bush to make some bubble.
Hey, Marcus, why don't you put in their webpage link into the chat group, bro? Are you on it, or did you close it? I can put it in for you. What is it?
I can do it as well. It's Memo Bottle.
Memo Bottle.
Yep.
Like that, right?
Let's support conscious people. Read their story. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that, dude. I love that. I really, man, there's been so much good stuff. There's been so much juice today. So much stuff that I'd love to touch on more. For example, this thing about how different the effects are depending on the trichome head, it just baffles me because that means that I guess we're just capturing the heads at different phase of development, meaning that there will be a slightly different expression of terpene and cannabinoid inside, right? Probably a little bit more,
absolutely.
Yeah, a little bit lower contents for the smaller heads, a bit more THCA focus, maybe a bit of CBG, but not so much of the CBNs, not so much of the other types of compounds that tend to develop in higher amounts later in the life cycle. Would you say that that's something that might be contributing, scientifically speaking, to the why of this?
In North America, maybe in Australia, that's not going to hold water because the heads are much smaller in the high potency heads. They're grown under the strong, close to the equator sun. You get 25s and 45s that are more like your 90s and your 120s in North America. So it moves around.
So Marcus, that's another point that I think is very important for, there's a lot of people out there that don't have a lot of expertise in this field, that are out there being apostles of the indica and sativa thing being a complete myth. There's nothing to it. But here again, we come up to a point, tropical cultivars, and Marcus, this is exactly the same thing that my experience and pretty much all of our colleagues have found over the years. When you're sourcing traditional genetics that have been grown in equatorial regions, or sometimes even semi-desertous regions, depending on the specific cultivar, like if it's a high elevation, more narrow leaf adapted cultivar, like a Nepalese or highland Ethiopian, they will have really small trichome heads, depending on which particular cultivar you're with. And that doesn't mean it's like a bad cultivar just because you're going to start collecting your juicy heads at 45 to 75 micron instead of the more typical like 70 to 120 range that you're going to find with more broadleaf cultivars. So right there is another indication that we should be paying attention to regional variants, even if scientists are arguing that cannabis is a single species. It's absolutely important for the product specialists to pay attention to what type of environment that traditional genetic or the mother lines that produce the more recent hybrid, where did they grow? This really explains to you a lot why the Jamaicans, you remember those old jammies that were in the market in like 98 to 2003, Marcus, the jammy that was really popular here in Vancouver. The
Sugar Bear, Juicy Fruit,
bro.
Jamaican,
Yeah,
all the
bro.
same
Yeah.
cultivar.
Yeah, if you ever look, if anybody out there ever gets their hands on those old school and look at those trichomes, to the naked eye, it looks totally caked. But when you look at the trichome up close, you're going to find exactly what Marcus is saying. Those types of cultivars, those heads, you're going to capture them more around the 45 to 75 micron range. So again, that's really interesting. And oftentimes it's overlooked by folks out there that are like, there's nothing to regional variants. There are no regional variants. Everything's a hybrid. There's no such thing as landrace. Remember, to those of you that have joined us in the continuing education sessions, we really go deep into that. And we find out that there is, in fact, an enormous amount of regional variation. And you're hearing it from one of the masters here, sitting right above me. He's telling you, in fact,
we know this through terroir, you know, like the wine industry set the tone for this. Like, you think grapes grow the same in the Bordeaux region as they do in like Iowa?
Thank you.
They don't. They express themselves differently. So why too, of course, cannabis, which is much more complex in its flavor profiles and its cannabinoid profiles than grapes are. And, you know, yet here we are in an industry that insists that we septically grow cannabis in a white room with fake lights, you know, artificial lights. And if we ever suggested that to the grape community, the wine community, they would literally be like, are you fucking insane? Those are the very things that create the expressions.
Dude, you know, so many people argue with me. They're like, I don't know if terroir is a thing. In fact, a lot of people recently on Twitter, some really big names, I think you saw it, bro. And they were like, yeah, it's all marketing bullshit. And I'm like, look, despite the fact that marketers latch on and make a fucking mockery of it, it doesn't mean that terroir doesn't exist. Look, anybody who's grown weed for more than a few years knows that if you grow in this medium or if you grow in that medium, the same cultivar is not going to do the same thing. So the question,
yeah, and explain to me why.
Yeah, and the other thing is, people are like, well, no, if it's indoor, there is no terroir. And I said, so it's an inert environment because it's indoor. It has absolutely no distinguishing qualities. Not did you use rock wool or did you use living soil? Were your temps at 20 degrees or were they at 28 degrees? Was your relative humidity at 70 or was it 45? Like, none of these things are going to play in. Terroir is a European term that is used broadly, not to just speak about how the soil affects the grape. Everything in the environment, the ecology and the environment come together to produce a unique genetic member of this genetic pool, a unique member, right? So again, folks, we're gonna have to close it up now, but dude, I'm gonna say one thing to you. I can't thank you enough for giving me your time twice in a row, Marcus. You don't know like how flattered and how just awesome it is for me to just be able to call you on the phone, brother. It's like just amazing. You make my life better every time I hang out with you, bro. So thank you so much for joining the show. Everyone out there, we're not giving anything away today, but we are doing a giveaway, despite the fact that it's not happening right now. All you need to do is go to CannaReps.ca and you need to enter the contest for the giveaway. We're giving away a cannabis sommelier pack. Please go on our webpage and check it out. Also, please go check out Embark Health. Keep up with Marcus. Go buy some bubble bags. Watch Hash Church. Follow this man on YouTube. Don't forget that he is giving away his knowledge all the time. He's so gracious. Marcus, thank you again, brother. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Adolfo. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, CannaReps. Thanks, all the people that are in the room. I appreciate your time as much as you appreciate mine. I gotta go though. Peace out.
Hasta luego. Thank you all. See you next month. By the way, next month, we're gonna have Mike Hichi joining us from Jamaica. We're gonna be doing a prepare for outdoor growing session. That means that we're going to be teaching you everything that there is to know about preparing for your outdoor grow, selecting your genetics, starting to grow at the right time, growing a big bush in veg period for sufficient period, and when to take it outdoor so she can really kill for you. Thank you all for joining us. That'll be next month, okay? Hasta luego.